very wealthy U.S. citizen is predicting that in 2011, we will witness the most important day in America in more than 50 years.
As you saw in the first video, this man is a total financial fraud. A professional scam artist, who sold lies to gullible investors, hawking secret reports on a fictitious cure to AIDS, the end of Middle Eastern oil, a secret government uranium enrichment program, and now the end of America. But the only thing really coming to an end, is this man's scam. Even if you thought he was right about an impending economic collapse, his advice would be really bad advice. One of the most glaring proofs that these Republicans are just scamming Americans and hurting America for the sole sake of lining their own corrupt pockets, is the stupid nature of the advice they give everyone after they tell them the world, or at least a country, is doomed. Instead of counseling all the normal things that really would need to be done to prepare for a disaster scenario like that, they start hawking their gold, and even to the most simple mind, a little reflection on the subject would demonstrate how stupid such advice for that scenario would be. If you knew you were stuck in New Orleans prior to Hurricane Katrina and could not get out, would the first thing you do be, call up Glenn Beck at Goldline and order gold? Really? Of course you wouldn't. You would be concerned about survival issues, not how many gold coins you have. To illustrate the simple and inescapable fact, all one has to do is look at the collapse of Nazi Germany during World War II. Prior to World War II, when the Nazis began deporting and imprisoning Jews, many Jews had converted their German currency into gold, which was then confiscated by the German government upon their arrests. As a result of this confiscation of personal gold, Nazi Germany had one of the largest stockpiles of gold in the world. But when Nazi Germany began to lose the war, it was not gold that Germany needed, it was energy to run their homes, their factories, their industries and their army. None of which was functional without fuel. A famous movie was made about this German predicament called The Battle of the Bulge, where German soldiers were literally forced to abandon their tanks on the battlefield because they literally ran out of gas. Yet Germany had one of the largest stockpiles of gold in the world. If these Republicans are so concerned about either you or your country they always claim to be protecting, their first and primary mission in life would be to get America energy independent by fully promoting and implementing green technology energy on every level possible. In this scenario, even if world supplies of fuel are disrupted, or distribution falls apart because of societal chaos, every facility, from your own personal home, to the factory that needs to make weapons would still be fully operational, thus mitigating chaos to a minimum. But of course, Republicans have not figured out how to scam solar energy yet, so they are hawking gold on TV and radio, not for the good of the country, but against it, and not for your protection, but in order to financially exploit you and your fear, and make themselves a profit. One Republican has even written an entire book on how to use fear-mongering to make a financial profit, and they have been following this technique to the letter, regardless of how it is hurting the lives and welfare of everyday working Americans, or our country. Why? Because Republicans are frauds. Everything they tell the common American is a lie. The only thing these Republicans care about is their own personal wallets, and they would be the first to sell Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, defend it, calling it a free market principle, when in actuality it has nothing to do with free market principles, and everything to do with being a crook and a cheat. The really sad thing about this con artist scam is that there really are a lot of very scared people in America right now. After 8 years of a secret suspension of free elections under George W. Bush, suspension of the Bill of Rights, reduction of the U.S. Constitution to, in George Bush's words, quote, a goddamn piece of paper, and plunging America to the brink of a 1930s-style Great Depression, people are reasonably nervous. So what do Republican scumbags like Alex Jones and Porter Stansberry do? They cash in on email frauds and scams, offering worthless financial advice, if not in fact dangerous. Here's the truth about an economic collapse in America. If there were such a thing, it would not be the end of America by any means. America has already seen a number of such collapses, and continued on, including the worst such collapse in the 1930s. The dollar was so worthless, gold was confiscated and placed into Fort Knox just to give it value again. All that gold came from American citizens who bought gold out of fear, and in the end, it was confiscated by the government, doing them virtually no good at all anyway. The Soviet Union collapsed too, and today it's one of the richest countries on earth. Wealthy Russian citizens can be spotted all over America, spending their wealth, with great freedom, and many of these new millionaires made their money after the so-called collapse of their country. But the really disturbing thing about all this disinformation being pumped out by Republican financial crooks is that the real things you should be doing, if you really believe an economic collapse is imminent in the US, would be to do exactly and precisely all the very things Republicans are now fighting tooth and nail to stop. First, if there is widespread economic collapse and a shutdown of government services, you need to invest in a full solar energy system for your home. Because as anyone who has lived through the aftermath of a hurricane can tell you, when there literally is a complete absence of government services, the greatest hardship is the absence of electricity. All the other problems that arise, from health emergencies to communication problems to basic sanitation issues to even eating and food storage, are in large part created as a result of having no electricity, and everything runs off of electricity. So by solving your electrical problem, by installing a complete solar system for your home, and coming off the electrical grid, you will be able to solve 70 to 80% of your problems that would arise. But of course, the Republicans are fighting solar energy because they do not want it to interfere with the sale of oil and gas, which is where they receive most of their political donations from. Even in the state of Florida, the Sunshine State, Republican state legislators have unethically held back federal and state tax rebates for installing solar energy into your home. And yet nothing could be more advantageous to a Floridian than having their own solar energy. It helps the country become energy independent. It stays on after a hurricane when electrical lines are down for weeks and in some cases months. It reduces cost of living for elderly people on fixed incomes, and it increases the values of homes, and it obviously reduces the size and dependency on government for energy. But what are Republicans doing? Republicans are holding back federal and state tax rebates for installing solar energy into your home, so Floridians will be forced out of the solar energy market. So you won't be hearing anti-American Republican scumbags like Alex Jones, or the fraud Republican Porter Stansberry, suggesting you get some solar energy for your home. No, instead they will sell you more gold. In fact, they will tell you to sink your entire life savings into gold, which is quite ironic. Why? Well, of course, because they have made a racket out of the gold market. Gold used to be a stable portfolio investment because no one paid any attention to it. Its price from year to year fluctuated very little, either up or down. Since it didn't go up, it also didn't go down. It just sat there nice and quietly, keeping pace with inflation, so that there was no loss of value. But that was the good old days before Republicans started scamming the gold industry just like they got finished scamming the real estate market. For years in real estate, every real estate agent in America sang the song of how real estate never goes down in value. It's always a solid investment when the market is unstable. It's something everyone must have, it never bubbles because everyone always needs a home, etc., etc. You can probably recall all the lies you heard yourself about real estate back in its heyday when Republicans were scamming it. But of course, anytime you scam an industry or a commodity, while you make short-term gains off of it, you also destroy its future. And this is what they did to real estate, and what they are now doing to gold. The truth is that if no one has any money, a brick of gold in this scenario would be worse than useless. What good is a brick of gold, sitting in the dark in a house too hot or too cold to live in, with no food to eat, no way to cook it, and no water to drink? When survival actually does become the issue, a brick of gold becomes virtually worthless. When the ATM machines don't work, and there is no money, and the banks have shut down, nobody can buy your brick of gold, even if they wanted to. And chances you will find someone roaming around wanting your brick of gold, instead of electricity or food or gas, will be virtually nil, except for looters. And the nice thing about a combination water reclamation system, with a solar energy system, is that you will be going totally green, which is not only good for our country, but also great for the environment. But unfortunately, not too good for Republican politics because they have taken sides against American citizens on all these national security and civil protection issues. They would rather sell you a bar of gold, and tell you to just die if you get sick, from not having any water, food or electricity. But aside from all the rampant filthily disgusting deceit these Republicans are engaging in to pad their filthy pockets with stolen money at the expense of both Americans and their country, is the pure anti-American policies these cutthroats are willing to engage in to make their pathetic little wads of Republican filthy lucre. This is what they are up to with your economy and their gold.
closely related to creating new jobs and halting inflation. We must protect the position of the American dollar as a pillar of monetary stability around the world. In the past 7 years, there's been an average of one international monetary crisis every year. Now, who gains from these crises? Not the working man, not the investor, not the real producers of wealth. The gainers are the international money speculators. Because they thrive on crises, they help to create them. In recent weeks, the speculators have been waging an all-out war on the American dollar. The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States. The effect of this action, in other words, will be to stabilize the dollar. Now, this action will not win us any friends among the international money traders, but our primary concern is with the American workers.
But it turns out they are both gold bugs.
I bought this gold coin.
Now, many people have been investing in gold, but Hugo Chavez wants to hoard it, physically, literally. The Venezuelan government controls the world's 15th largest stockpile of gold, about 365 tons. But like most gold investors, it doesn't really have that gold. But like most gold investors, it doesn't really have that gold. But like most gold investors, it doesn't really have that gold. But like most gold investors, it doesn't really have that gold, at least not physically. More than half of Venezuela's reserves are held overseas in London, Zurich, and New York. So he's now announced he wants his gold. But how do you transport 211 tons of gold across the seas? Well, by spending lots of money. You have to insure against a gold heist like the one in the Italian job. Add it all up, and you could get about $500 million spent. That's serious money for any country, let alone one that has negative growth rates as Venezuela does these days. What in the world is Hugo Chavez thinking?
What Hugo Chavez is thinking is the same thing that a lot of other people who have been suckered by gold hype have started to realize, and that is that, as Fareed just pointed out, the vast majority of gold ownership is based on certificates of gold ownership, not actual possession of physical gold. And the really amazing thing about this fact is that these gold vaults that sell these certificates are not even audited. That's right. They are not even audited. So in essence, you are simply taking the word of the people who run these vaults, and buying a piece of paper from them for millions of dollars. So in other words, millions of dollars in hedge funds, institutions, and people are sitting on nothing more than stacks of paper, with nothing more than a wink of the eye, and the exhortation to quote, "Trust me, I would never lie to you about your gold." How well has that ever worked out in the financial world for anybody? Yeah. Exactly. And this is the dark cloud that is now creeping up over the horizon of the gold world. In fact, it has been claimed by commentators and researchers on the subject that there is concrete evidence the scamming has already taken place, and there is already a demonstrable shortage of physical gold for these gold certificates held by everyone from hedge funds to government state-owned sovereign funds, from Arab sheiks to Latin American dictators, to American millionaires. To make matter even more drastically dark, the actual head of the World Gold Fund, Managing Director Jason Toussaint, nor any of its World Gold Council officers and directors, own any gold in their own system. Not one. Not a single one. How many times have you bought a product from a salesman that wouldn't even own it himself? Republican gold hawkers smirk with embarrassment over this fact, and claim that once everyone realizes they have been scammed by phony gold ownership certificates, the price of gold will go up, not down, since everyone will want their physical gold. But that is like claiming the housing market will go up, because millions of homes will be in foreclosure. It just will not happen, because no one is going to value a burned commodity that has destroyed consumer and investor confidence in it, through market deception and injury.